The penultimate question is, why raise quail? Well, there are a number of reasons to raise quail, and a number of reasons that I believe are beneficial for you to raise quail. One of the primary reasons is to become more self-sufficient. A lot of people out there want to have more control over the food that ends up on their dinner plate, and by raising quail, whether you're incubating like I am right now and raising it through to meat production, or if you're doing it for eggs, or both as I do, you get to control the whole process start to finish. You get to control what they eat, you get to ensure that they're clean and healthy throughout the whole process. If you're constantly buying meat from a supermarket, you don't really have control over the process. You're relying on government regulators confirming that the process is correct. You don't really know what food's being given to the birds, whether it be chickens or the beef, and you're relying a lot of trust in that process. And another thing is the cost. So if you're doing it yourself, you're obviously cutting out all of the wholesale and the retail on a lot of that meat or the eggs. So by bringing that in-house, you're obviously going to drop the cost, and producing your own meat at home, if you're prepared to put in the effort, and it's, as I go into in other videos, it's not that much effort. If you're prepared to do it for yourself and enjoy the process as I do, then you're going to find that your meat production, your egg production, your protein in general, is going to be a lot cheaper than if you actually go out and buy it. And in a world where inflation is going to become more of an issue, it seems to be going forward, producing your own meat, or protein I should say, is going to be a key way to actually avoid the impacts of inflation. Even if seed cost goes up, which it has in some areas, you're still cutting out all of those other steps in the supply chain, right from start to finish, when you actually purchase meat at a supermarket. So by cutting out those costs throughout, because they're going to get inflation anyway throughout that whole process, you're going to get meat and eggs that are a lot cheaper. There are a number of other things to consider. So self-sufficiency aside, which I think, by the way, is a fantastic goal to pursue, why in particular should you pursue quail as the go-to bird compared to other birds or other animals that you may be looking at growing? Well, one of the primary reasons is they don't need a lot of effort. You don't need a lot of space. They can be packed in. They're really easy to look after. Not a lot of maintenance there in terms of just raising them. They're very independent. They don't need a mother when they start out of the egg. They will be eating by themselves and drinking within the first day. You just need to give them some heat, and then they will grow up from that pretty independently the whole way through their life. There's very little care throughout the entire life. Just as long as you give them enough feed and water, they'll pretty much look after themselves. They're very hardy to the heat and cold. Once they get through that early stage, they don't make a lot of noise. Once you manage the rooster numbers early on, they make very little noise. They're a very quiet bird. They also produce meat and eggs at a rapid growth rate, so they're very productive. They will hit butcher size very quickly compared to other poultry in particular. And the eggs, they can produce them very young, and they're a high percentage of their body weight, so they actually churn them out, and they churn them out more consistently throughout the year versus some other poultry. Another thing to consider is the flavour of the meat. If you try quail, perhaps you like it. It's a little bit stronger in some ways than other meat, and it's not weird or anything like that, but I find it quite nice compared to chicken's a bit dull when I eat chicken these days compared to quail. And this feels like, when you're eating it, to me, it feels like there's more packed into it. It's just, it's a little bit more filling. Quail are not picky eaters. They will eat pretty much most things that come out of the kitchen. So instead of throwing things in the bin, if you've got quail, you can throw them in the cage with the quail and just see if they have a liking to it. And that will keep down the cost of raising those quail through, which is always good. And it's better than throwing away and wasting a lot of your organic material. The markets are also growing around the areas now with quail as more people recognise them as a viable option, which is great in terms of you can actually sell your eggs or your chicks or your adult birds. So that it's a source of income. It can cover the cost of some of your seed, and the more people that get involved in quail, the better. Absolutely, for everybody. You get more product development, improvements, more knowledge out there, and things keep growing, which is great. Quail also have a lot less restrictions on them, being a small bird compared to, particularly if you live in a city, there's a lot of restrictions on what type of animals and the quantity you can have. Quail often skip through that because of, obviously they're smaller and they're quiet and they don't need as much space, so you can get by through those rules and regulations. To summarise as to why you should consider quail as your go-to for raising your own meat or eggs, if you want to become more self-sufficient, they are a bird that require very little care. They look after themselves, they're very independent, they don't need a lot of space, they're very quiet. They tend to skirt past a lot of the rules because of their size and their categorisation, so you can manage that in cities and in urban areas if you don't have a lot of space. I find that actually you're more engaged with the food that you produce. It's part of the self-sufficiency movement at the moment, so you appreciate what gets put on your dinner plate, and they're a lot of fun just to go from start to finish. You get involved and it's a lot of fun, I've found.